Hi, thank you for joining us. We're going to present our draft Parks and Recreation Master Plan for the town of Shelburne. We're very excited about this project. It's been on our agenda for probably 2 years now, and council has reiterated their strategic priorities include that they want to improve and enhance parks and recreation as part of the quality of services in our community. I'm Denise Morrissey, I'm the CAO. We're going to go through the presentation that council's already received from our consulting partners, which is GSP. And who is with us today is Steve Weaver. He's the president, and he and his colleagues have been putting together this plan. They've been consulting as well as part of the process with community engagement. And he'll be going through at the end of his presentation what our next steps are, including the final report, which will be presented to council on September 28th at the council meeting. So without further comments, we'll turn it over to Steve to walk you through this. And we hope you're excited about what our vision is for the community and what your input has provided us in terms of the concept plans. Enjoy.
Thank you, Denise, and thank you to everybody listening and for those who've participated in the Parks and Recreation Master Plan process. As Denise mentioned, my name is Steve Weaver and I'm the town's consulting planner, and I'm happy to be part of this project. And we have some recommendations and ideas to share with you today regarding the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, which is available in draft for review and comments. Just to overview what a master plan is all about, in Shelburne's case, this is an update to the previous master plan created in 2009, which really focused on town parks throughout the town. Many of the recommendations from the 2009 plan have been implemented. As a splash pad is one recent example of that, community garden and dog park in Fiddle Park as well, among other great projects, soccer fields, some improvements to baseball diamonds at Highland Park and so forth, all stemmed from that plan created 14 years ago. And so it does take some time to implement these master plans. They take a long-term view. And the recommendations of this master plan in 2023 are intended to provide a framework for parks and recreational improvements over the next 10 to 15 plus years, aligned with the growth that's expected over that period. The other purpose of this is to do a refreshed look at the current parks and recreation facilities inventory. All of the parks have been visited. All the recreation facilities have been visited and photographed and documented. There's been a lot of discussion with town staff. There's been presentations to council. There's been public open houses to discuss what's working well and what needs improvement in the community with respect to parks and recreation. The new plan will provide updated strategies for managing and improving those existing parks, as well as for new parks and facilities that will be needed in the future. And that leads to the last point, which is as much about planning for change. Shelburne has continued to grow over the last decades, and continued growth is expected going forward. With growth come additional demands for services and recreation, and this is to prepare for those needs. There are other documents that work in conjunction with the master plan, such as the town's official plan, secondary plans, and the community improvement plan created in 2019. Quick overview of the growth forecast. So as of the 2021 census, the town's population was listed at 8,994. I'm sure that it's eclipsed 9,000 and closer to 10,000 now as we are here in 2023. And as we look out to 2051, we're working with a forecast that's been created by the County of Dufferin for Shelburne's growth for planning purposes of 15,100. So this plan is intended to address the parks and recreation needs of approximately an additional 5,000 or 6,000 people, but with the recommendations that will lead to further updates over time as things change in the future. As I mentioned in the previous slide, this master plan is a 10 to 15 year focus initially, with some recommendations that will take that longer term view. This slide just summarizes the overall structure of the master plan. These are the 5 key components, and each of these components are addressed in the presentation with a summary of some of the key ideas and recommendations. The structure follows the overall hierarchy of parks in the community. At the top, we have some of the larger parks in the community with the most facilities or major sports facilities, including Greenwood Park, Highland Park, which is also known as Natasha Patterson Memorial Park, and KTH Park. At the neighborhood level, there are recommendations to address the renewal and updating needs of existing neighborhood parks, as well as some new neighborhood parks that will be needed in newer development areas. Community trails are a town-wide asset, and there are some recommendations both for improving existing trails as well as creating some new and future trail connections to complete the system. Section 4 addresses more of an indoor recreation facilities, as well as programming and service delivery elements of parks and recreation in general throughout the town. And then in conjunction with the overall townwide Parks and Recreation Master Plan, a specific site master plan or Fiddle Park Plan has been created for the town's largest park site, which is of course Fiddle Park. And this stems from some previous work in the Community Improvement Plan as well, where some ideas were identified for making Fiddle Park Plan more of a community park with a broader range of amenities. In terms of the inventory of parks and facilities that this master plan includes, this is a map that shows them all. I won't identify everything that this map is showing. Obviously, there are quite a number of parks and facilities throughout the town. There are other public facilities in town as well that aren't owned by the town, but do help to meet some parks and open space needs. Certainly the elementary schools, of which there are 3, and the high school as well. They provide some access to sports fields and other outdoor amenities, and there is some availability of gymnasiums and other indoor spaces in the schools as well, available through the school board for community use from time to time. The green areas show the parks that are identified with some recommendations in each park throughout this master plan, and some future parks as well that will be required where the land has already been dedicated for new parks and new subdivisions, including the Highland Village Park on the west side, number 22, and the Fieldgate Development or Emerald Crossing Subdivision Park, which will be required in that subdivision in number 23. The lighter shaded areas show other open spaces, trail connections, natural areas, and so forth that help to connect and complete the parks and open space system. So starting off with Greenwood Park as the largest, community sports park in Shelburne. One of the key recommendations for Greenwood Park is to create a complete multi-use trail system. There are a number of connections that have been identified previously or as part of developments near Greenwood Park. For example, number 1 would connect via a new pedestrian bridge that's required as part of the Ravines Edge development on Main Street. That's at 600 Main Street, where that trail would in fact connect along the Besley Drain down to Main Street and the sidewalk there to help create that connection. And once that trail is complete through that Ravines Edge development, one of the priority trail connections should be to bring that southerly connection in and through the park. And that would also involve a connection over to the walkway at Rinchwell Crescent, which currently just comes into the park and into the grass lawn areas of the southwest part of the park. So a connection through there to the entry point and parking area is recommended. In the north part, there are walkways and trails that already connect to Greenwood Park from Greenbrook Village in the north. And it is recommended that some additional connectivity be completed in the north part through number 3 and number 4, connecting to the sidewalk on Greenwood Ave and to the internal trail network that exists, shown with the dash lines. Number 5 would connect the existing trail at the west edge of the north soccer field up to Tansley Street. which was planned as part of the Greenbrook Village development when concepts for the future park expansion area were identified. Number 6 would create a bit of a loop through Greenwood Park, connecting to number 1 in the south, as well as the opportunity to use a loop trail within the park for fitness and other activities, including a variety of sizes of loops and distances. And those would also serve to connect to some of the key facilities in the center part of the park, including the playground areas and the new splash pad, for example. Lastly, there is a desire line or a walking route that has been somewhat established informally with people taking a shortcut through the park, roughly in the location of number 7 and number 5 as well. And the intent there is to formalize that connection over to Hammond Street with a multi-use trail. The total distance of these trails would be in the order of 1.8 kilometers or 1,780 meters. Upgrading of existing trails brings that total closer to 2 kilometers of trails. So over time, the Greenwood Park Trails network would be a significant trail opportunity for a variety of activities within the park. In conjunction with the trail and other improvements in Greenwood Park, there are a few supporting facility improvements that we see would be needed as well for Greenwood Park to continue to support increased usage. One of those is to pave the existing parking area to maximize its capacity and durability. In fact, there are 2 parking areas, one smaller one along the basketball court and skate park area, and the larger main parking area. A new parking area has also been envisioned for the north access to the park off of Tansley Street in Greenbrook Village. And that would help to provide an additional parking capacity for the northerly part of the park as facilities are developed there. Recognizing that that parking area would be close to some existing homes on either side, some landscaping and screening of the parking area on either end would be recommended in that case as well. There is an existing acoustic or noise mitigation berm at the easterly end of the Greenwood Park area, and it is recommended that some additional landscape improvements be considered there, including planting that with native trees. And then finally on this slide, in the south end of the park, there is an opportunity with some space available for possible additional interim temporary parking or seasonal parking, trailhead access, maybe even natural restoration or community gardens. So some ideas for that unused space at the south end of the park with the trail access that would go in that location, and the opportunity in the wooded area for a possible nature trail loop. In the park expansion area, so this is the north part of Greenwood Park off of Tansley Street, there is an opportunity for some additional sports fields. When this park area was initially expanded and acquired by the town as part of the Greenbrook Village subdivision, and some of the reconfiguration of the storm ponds to the south. The idea was to put an additional soccer field there at that time. Since then, there have been new trends that have emerged and interest and demand for a possible cricket pitch. And while the discussions around cricket have largely been focused on KTH Park today, the master plan presents 2 alternative options for consideration of a cricket pitch and recommends that both be considered and evaluated further to determine a preferred site. The area of Greenwood Park, the expansion area, is large enough to house a standard multi-use sports field, including a cricket pitch. The rectangles that are shown overlaying that illustrate how the pitch could potentially be used both for cricket as well as soccer. Those would be junior-sized fields, not the same dimensions as the senior fields that exist already. But the goal here would be to try and create as much multi-use opportunity for as many user groups as possible with this improvement. Because this area of the park is a bit further from the existing washroom facility at the southwest part of the park at the main entrance. It is also recommended that consideration be given to eventually adding a washroom building and park shelter in this part of the park as well, along the future trail system. Within the existing main part of Greenwood Park, some improvements have been identified as well through the process. Some tree plantings around and adjacent to the new splash pad to create some shade, as well as some seating with benches in that area are recommended. A shade structure as well should be considered so that people can get some relief from the sun in the summertime when kids are playing in the splash pad. The existing basketball court and skate park area is all in one concrete pad area currently, but it's recommended that the unused former BMX trail area could be considered for a new basketball or multi-use court or even an outdoor rink configuration in that area. There's enough land available there in the area of the former BMX track, which has become unused. Eventually, the playground equipment in Greenwood Park will need to be replaced. And when that is done, we would recommend that the play equipment be consolidated into one area. Currently, there are multiple play areas scattered amongst several different safety surfaces, and consolidating them in one location helps to improve accessibility and barrier-free pathway access to the playground as a whole. And then finally, with some of these improvements as well, while there is some more dated, street lighting in the park itself, we would recommend that some new park lighting be considered in specific areas of the park, not necessarily to encourage nighttime use, but just to make sure that there's safety and that they are timer or motion activated, and where lighting is needed in the winter time, for example, for ice rinks, that's available as well. Regarding Highland Park or Natasha Patterson Memorial Park, this is recommended to continue to function as the town's primary baseball facility venue. There are 3 diamonds within the park boundary currently, as well as 2 on the adjoining school property to the north. To improve the overall connectivity and usability of the park and access to those diamonds, as well as other facilities within the park, it's recommended that a multi-use trail be connected from this parking areas in the north and the schools to the south, where there's the existing storage building, and then across the bottom end of the park connecting to the rail trail on the west. Accessibility improvements are also recommended, including consolidating the playground facilities into one area, similar to the idea for Greenwood Park, where there would then be one accessible pathway to the entire playground area, as well as the pavilion and washrooms from the parking area. Updating and consolidating the play structures also provides an opportunity to consider a themed type of play structure. An example of that with a railway theme is shown in the picture at the bottom. And moving on to KTH Park. So as I mentioned earlier regarding Greenwood Park, KTH Park has been the focus of consideration for a possible cricket pitch or multi-use sports field, including cricket, to date. And there certainly is enough physical space there. There are some grading challenges, as there is a swale cut between the existing ball diamond and the existing soccer field. And you can see that on the air photo through this area. So there would need to be some regrading and fill brought in order to make that work. Also, obviously, there would need to be some reconfiguration of the existing soccer field and removal of the ball diamond to make a cricket pitch function properly in that park as well. So this is one reason why the review of 2 alternative locations is recommended to see which one can provide the most functional and beneficial facility for the desired activities in the best location. There are some trail connections recommended as well. Currently, the sidewalk along Homestead Drive comes into the north end of the park, and it's recommended that that be extended down to the south, and also that the existing multi-use trail that connects to Simon Street Park in the west be extended right through KTH Park and onwards through the adjoining school property, which would require an agreement with the school board, and over to Fiddle Park. And eventually the existing washroom building in the park will need replacement. The timing of that has not been determined yet. In conjunction with that, consideration should also be given to a possible shelter or shade structure. So moving on to neighborhood parks and parkettes. These are the parks and smaller playground areas that generally serve specific neighborhoods or individual streets, depending on the scale of the park. Walters Creek Park is recommended for some playground replacement. That is a near-term improvement that's anticipated in 2023 or 2024. Some of the play structures there have had some maintenance and repair issues, and it's difficult to source some of the components needed to replace those components. So wholesale replacement of the play structures will be needed at Walters Creek Park. And similar to the recommendations for the other parks, consolidating the play equipment into one area is also recommended, and then an accessible pathway would be provided to the playground area as a whole. There is the opportunity for a new multi-use trail connection as well, or a secondary nature trail. Currently, there is a trail that can be accessed along Walters Creek from the driveway. There has been just some disruption of that as a result of the new well building that has been constructed, or the expanded well building, which is shown in blue. And that trail, once reconnected, would have connectivity to the west. And then Simon Street Park, the top right image here, the recommendations there include formalizing and connecting this existing trail connection to the pedestrian bridge over to Franklin Street and making that accessible as a primary trail route. Also providing an accessible pathway between the park elements, including the playground. This park could potentially be a suitable location for a trailhead as well, in conjunction with the trail extension to the east, for example, where you could go all the way through KTH Park and over to Fiddle Park on a multi-use trail, as well as the trail that heads south over the berm and the trail that heads west to Franklin Street. A potential half-court basketball court could also potentially be located in Simon Street Park, and that's a recommendation to consider in conjunction with Simon Court Park or Parkette that I'll get to shortly. And then in the bottom, through the master plan process, we did hear of demands for more basketball and multi-use sport courts in a variety of neighborhoods. Summerhill is one of those areas. And there are a few grading considerations that would need to be addressed, but there is possibly some room for a new multi-use court in the southeast part of Summerhill Park, shown as number 8 here on the drawing. For the parkettes, again, these are the smaller park sites that provide kind of a single or small function with respect to playgrounds or other gathering spaces and green spaces in the community. Jack Downing Park has recently been updated with some new pavers and other landscape improvements and a new shelter. And we would recommend that the town continue to review opportunities for special events, programming, and public art for that redeveloped park area. For Greenwood Crescent Parkette, This is a fairly small, that's the one at the bottom left. It's a fairly small park area where there's just a playground. That playground area does not currently have an accessible barrier-free connection, and we'd recommend that that be considered, as well as updated safety surfacing for the play equipment. For Morden Drive Park, this is still a relatively new park developed in conjunction with Greenbrook Village subdivision. There is no seating, however, currently in the park, and it was noted that there's no bicycle rack either or bike parking, and a few more tree plantings could be considered as shown as well. And then finally, with respect to Simon Court Parkette, this is a bit of a larger site than the other parkettes, but there is an existing basketball half court there that it has seen better days, and it is recommended that that could be decommissioned in conjunction with potentially installing a new basketball court at Simon Street Park. Other than that basketball court, it does seem that Simon Court Parkette is more oriented to younger children, whereas Simon Street Park is more oriented to maybe older kids. And that's where we thought, basketball might be a more suitable activity at Simon Street Park, whereas Simon Court Parkette should continue to be looked at as a place for young kids, as well as for older adults and others who just want to enjoy the outdoors. And in that regard, recommend that some additional seating be considered, tree plantings, maybe even some decorative fencing. The pathway connection to the Dufferin Oaks area to the west is also informal at this point, and could be formalized with a paved pathway and connecting as a sidewalk down to Simon Street. There are a couple of future neighborhood parks that will be needed as well. Highland Village subdivision includes a park block near the north central part of the development, just south of the stormwater pond. And there are some components of the park plan for that site that will be completed as part of the development, including the trail connection and some of the tree planting. However, the balance of the park is conceptual at this point. There was a plan produced for that park block as part of the subdivision planning. That's a few years old now and will need some potential updating. But the components are envisioned for that park, a number of different components, including there is an existing park washroom building, which is also part of the sanitary pumping station, which is still under a maintenance period with the developer, but will ultimately become a town facility. There is a little bit of parking for that pumping station and washroom building as well. As I mentioned, there's some planned multi-use pathways shown as number 3 through the park that would connect to the storm pond area in the north and onward to Main Street, as well as to the sidewalk on Barnett Drive in the west, and then down to the washroom building and Stewart Street in the south. The tree plantings that have been planned for the park are shown as well in green. The plan that was drawn up with the development incorporated 2 playground areas for both junior and senior children's playgrounds. There are a number of seating areas proposed as well, including benches and armor stone seating. A park shelter has been identified as number 7, kind of in the southwest part of the park. Basketball or multi-use court, which could also function as an outdoor ice rink in the winter, has been identified as one of the main features in the middle of the park. Number 9 is identified as a potential future spray feature, given that Shelburne has just recently opened its first splash pad. I think that the addition of a second splash pad is probably some ways down the future, but it is conceptually identified for a possible location in Highland Village Park if a second location is needed in the future. And then finally, a conceptual potential future community garden location is identified as well. So this park will be subject to some further design work and consultation with the neighborhood to determine the final components that will be included in the park. and the timing of that would also be established at that time. Over in the Emerald Crossing or Fieldgate development, northeast of Highway 89 and County Road 124, again, similar to Highland Village Park, there is a park washroom building that is also a pumping station that has been built. It's not assumed by the town yet. It's still under developer maintenance. There is a small parking area and driveway access there as well. There are a number of multi-use pathways proposed through the park in a bit of a different layout than the other park example. This would be essentially creating a central circle and lawn area for a variety of casual activities, gathering, picnicking, so forth. One of the main features in the park include senior and junior play equipment in the central area of the circle, a proposed park shelter, as well as a potential basketball, multi-use court, and outdoor ice rink. So similar types of components for this neighborhood park as shown in Highland Village with a bit different layout. Again, the timing of development of this park hasn't been established yet, as it does depend on when some of the work required with the development of the subdivision is completed by the developer, and then ultimately when the town takes over to put some of the facilities in the park, as well as funding considerations. Moving on to community trails. Some improvements have been identified to existing trails, including the Simon Street Trail linkage and the Greenwood Ave Trail linkage. Both are suitable for potential paving as multi-use trails. Regarding new and future trail connections, this was discussed previously, the connection opportunity through KTH Park and over to Fiddle Park, and the connection in the southwest between Victoria Street and the south end of Highland Village. Each of these would require landowner agreements with the affected landowners, the school board in the top example, and the private landowners in the bottom. The overall trails plan is shown here, and I won't go through it in detail, but there's a variety of different types of trails, on-street connections, off-street trail routes, multi-use trails, secondary trails. The goal of this trails plan is to create options for different types of trail activities, whether it's walking or cycling, as well as different levels of difficulty, distance, and also obviously connecting to key destinations in the community. There are a number of opportunities that have been identified for possible trailheads as well, and the opportunity for regional connections via the existing Dufferin County Rail Trail, which is also being looked at through some of the county planning work. The next section of the master plan deals more with indoor recreation facilities as well as programming and service delivery considerations. The primary facilities that we're talking about in terms of recreation facilities involve park-related buildings, as well as the Grace Tippling Hall and pavilions. The CDRC is also a town-owned facility, but it is managed by a board comprised of multi-municipal representatives from multiple municipalities. The recommendation is to do a facility condition assessment and identify and evaluate the repair and replacement needs for those facilities in terms of maintaining them over the next 10 years. Also to look at some of the outdoor facilities such as play structures, existing park lighting, trails, park furnishings such as benches, pavilions, washrooms, and so forth, to map out when those may need some capital maintenance or replacement, and then to integrate the results of that work into the town's overall asset management plan. For Grace Tippling Hall, a separate study was done, a feasibility study, and the recommendation here is that should continue to be used to guide future capital programming and staffing resources through annual budgeting processes. Regarding the CDRC, so some detailed recommendations here to consider with respect to the future of that facility. The goal of the master plan is to ensure that that facility is addressed in terms of its capital maintenance needs. So it is an older facility. and it's going to need some capital maintenance and repair to keep it going. And that those results of that facility condition assessment would need to be integrated into the overall asset management plan for the town. Recommendation, of course, is to also work with the CDRC board and the participating municipalities to ensure enough of a reserve is established to ensure that the facility can be maintained and that those costly improvements and repairs can be made when they are needed. The other recommendations relate more to how the facility is used and making sure that the available ice time, the multi-use rooms, and the spaces available there is used to its full potential, and the town working with the board and also considering direct town provided programming opportunities, as well as working with volunteer program providers to ensure that the facility is well used. And that's a segue into the next part regarding programming and service delivery. The town does not currently have a community services department, and as the town has continued to grow and the number of facilities has continued to increase, and demands for recreation programming has also increased, one of the recommendations here is to review the possibility of creating a community services department, firstly by establishing a dedicated position for a recreation programmer and special event coordinator. That would assist with implementing the master plan, as well as collaborating with the school board to ensure available school spaces are used and available to the community as well. Developing new communication tools to promote available programs and events and activities. Investing in signage and digital information to ensure awareness of available programs and facilities in the community. And then also obviously working closely with other service providers, including volunteers and others, to ensure that events are well planned and continue to grow and succeed with generating good participation. Conducting annual surveys to determine desired community programs, as that may change over time with new trends. Continue to improve the working relationship with the school board and making sure that the procedures for booking school facilities for community use are streamlined and that people know how to do that. That the municipality should continue to have a key role in addressing any gaps in programming that isn't available from other service providers, and also reviewing user fees and making sure those are both competitive, but also representative of the cost of delivering, the facilities and programs, while keeping in mind affordability perspectives and subsidy program opportunities. And the final component of the master plan for the purposes of this presentation is the Fiddle Park Plan. This again builds on the 2019 Community Improvement Plan, where some big moves were identified for Fiddle Park, as well as some other facilities that tie into the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. So redesigning Fiddle Park as a community hub was the overall direction for Fiddle Park. The Fiddle Park Plan really focuses on the central part of the existing park, which is about 18.5 acres in area. Much of the park property is in a protected natural area condition. And some of the existing central portion of the park is used for other purposes, such as the berm along the east edge, and the existing dog park that has been created, as well as the community garden. In terms of the area context, Fiddle Park is in a location that has seen some change over time. To the southwest are existing major industries, including KTH Manufacturing and Ice River Springs, or Blue Mountain Plastics, both of their facilities. There is a great opportunity to see some school board use of Fiddle Park in the future, potentially for outdoor learning activities and that sort of thing, with the proximity of Centennial Highlands to the west. To the north, there's some opportunities to coordinate with providers of commercial services. There's the existing No Frills Plaza, as well as the new commercial plaza at Ojibwe Road and Highway 89. where there's opportunity for people to use the commercial area and then visit the park for picnicking and other purposes. And then, of course, with that development at the northeast corner of Highway 89 and County Road 124, there will be more people within walking distance of the park as well. With the existing conditions, there is an existing building within the park, community building, supports special events and provides washrooms as well. There is an existing community garden as well that has been well used. In the top right image, one of the issues currently is that after a major rainfall, there is some ponding that occurs in the lower part of the park, kind of in the southwest or in the northwest corner of the entry. And that is something that has been kept in mind with the proposed design, that would need to be addressed as access into the central part of the park is blocked by some of those drainage issues after a major rainfall. Much of the park area is existing open field areas, which are used for events and for general unorganized or casual recreational purposes. The main building or structure in the site is the existing pavilion, which is shown in these two images. And then one of the latest additions to Fiddle Park has been in the northeast corner with the existing dog park. So as part of the Fiddle Park Master Plan or Fiddle Park Plan process, through the community input and discussion on that, there were 5 guiding principles identified as a framework for the future improvements, including promoting more community level use of the park to create a gathering space and destination for a variety of different programming, that the design of the park should be flexible so that it can accommodate special events as well as regular day-to-day use and in a very functional way. That overall, the intent is to maintain more of a natural setting as opposed to large buildings or extensive infrastructure in the park. That all season use should be a consideration as well to maximize recreation opportunities throughout the year, including winter activities, and universal accessibility so that all people can find something in Fiddle Park for them and their families to enjoy. To determine the plan for Fiddle Park, there were 3 options presented in September 2022, and ultimately those options informed the preferred concept. Each option looked at a similar range and mix of facilities, but at a different level of development. The first option looked at complete redevelopment of the park for a whole variety of facilities. And the second concept kind of built on that with locating some of those facilities in different areas. And then the third showed how some of the existing park functions could be maintained while introducing some components of the first 2 concepts. This is the image in the Fiddle Park report that illustrates the recommended concept plan. There is a lot of information shown here, and I won't highlight all of the facilities identified, but maybe just some of the key features that have been recommended for consideration. One of the main features is identified here as number 10, which would be a year-round multifunctional trail. So this would be a paved surface that could support a range of fitness activities, walking, activities throughout the spring, summer, and fall. And then in the winter, it would also involve a cooled system so that it could become a winter skating trail loop. And that would also serve to connect different areas and features of the park throughout the year as well. The central feature builds on the location of the existing pavilion and is intended to continue to support its enhanced and increased use over time as both as a gathering space within the pavilion, but also as a venue for performing music and presentations and that kind of thing. Theater the intent is to provide a flexible range of opportunities with an amphitheater oriented towards the pavilion, and then taking advantage of the sloped lawn area as well. Outdoor movies is one example of another type of activity that continued to be benefit from the pavilion and the amphitheater. Some of the other facilities include the multi-use court in the southwest corner. Some of these facilities are really parts that could complement the main facilities by providing something for everyone. So while this is not intended to be dominated by sports facilities or those types of activities, it's something that's intended for people of all ages. And this would allow people who are interested in playing different types of court sports to use those facilities, while others could take advantage of some playground areas in this location, both in proximity to the existing building and the washrooms available there. In the entry part, central part of the park, between the future parking area and the existing park entrance, a community plaza is recommended, which would be a gathering space with a shade structure, and would have opportunities for potentially some water features, seating, and those kinds of things. And as you can see, it's themed around the shape of a fiddle to pay homage to Fiddle Park and its history as the location for Fiddlefest. An overall pathway network throughout the park is also identified. In the easterly part of the park, that would be for more passive use, where you'd have these trail loops and connections of varying distances connecting through a memorial forest area. And this would be planted over time, and would allow recognition and memorialization of individuals or events in the community. Parking will be a key improvement. As I mentioned, a future parking area is identified here. As these improvements would be phased in over time, some of the existing laneways and lawn areas in the park could continue to be used for temporary parking as well for events. Over the longer term, as events are programmed and more parking needs arise, a parking strategy would need to be identified in conjunction with that, including possible partnership with the school board and other sites nearby to allow some community use of available surface parking in the area. So the programming opportunities are identified on the right-hand side and include both cold and warm season opportunities with the goal of supporting year-round use. A phasing plan has been identified. Again, this is to allow some continued use of the park for annual events, as has happened in the past, while also allowing the improvements to be brought in over time. And this is detailed further in the report. The preliminary cost estimate for the phase 1 improvements is quite significant. This would take several years to come to be, but it's over $5 million because of the size of the site and the amount of work that would be required for site preparation and servicing and grading considerations. Certainly the trail itself is the largest feature, and to make it year-round and a viable skating trail is a significant cost. Once the plan is advanced further, information will become available regarding some funding strategies and available funding sources, and also community fundraising opportunities. The right-hand side of this slide shows the overall longer-term costing, including both phases, so phase 2 and all the parts in the second phase, and the total costs over the full build-out of the park would be in the $9.3 and $9.4 million range. Again, this is a 10+ year plan, and the implementation of each of the components will be dependent on funding as it becomes available, and all opportunities to support the funding of individual components would be explored. So wrapping up, a quick recommendations summary. The cost estimates for each of the recommendations are identified here for the main part of the master plan. These are quantified in the middle column, and some operating considerations are identified on the right-hand side. And then in the middle, again, we sum up the total for each component. And I'll just breeze through these quickly. You can see what some of the main park improvements and new park costs amount to. These are preliminary estimates, and the total is summarized at the bottom, including the town-wide Parks and Recreation Master Plan recommendations, as well as the long-term full build-out of Fiddle Park cost estimate, arriving at a total of over 17 million. And again, all of these improvements would be dependent on the funding strategy, and much of the funding for new facilities and expanded facilities would be growth related. So that's a lot of information, and we appreciate people's feedback on this as they have opportunity to review. So the next steps will be the document will continue to be available on line for review and comment. The display boards for Fiddle Park are available at Town Hall for review. This presentation is available for a fulsome summary of the recommendations. Based on the feedback received, the master plan would be finalized, as well as the Fiddle Park plan in September, with the goal of presenting the final plan on September 25th at the regular council meeting on that date. And implementation will be over the course of 10+ years, including funding and capital planning around that. Thank you again for tuning in to this presentation, and we look forward to your comments and questions regarding the recommendations. Have a great day.